sponsoring S539, the bipartisan Protect Our Children Reauthorization Act introduced by Senator Cornyn. This bill authorizes funding for the Department of Justice to assist federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies in investigating and prosecuting child exploitation. These bills, along with 4 others, including my colleague Senator Klobuchar, these bills honor our law enforcement officers and have support from both Republicans and Democrats. The legislation I want to focus on today is S911, the bipartisan Chief Herbert D. Profit Act, which I was proud to introduce with Senator Mitch McConnell. The men and women who serve as law enforcement officers risk their lives every day to keep our community safe. Whether they're actively serving or have retired in good standing, we owe them a debt of gratitude. That's why the Public Safety Officers Benefits Program exists. It provides death and education benefits to the surviving family members of fallen law enforcement officers, firefighters, and other first responders. It also provides disability benefits to officers who have suffered irreparable injuries in the line of duty. It's a critical program that supports the families of those who sacrificed everything to protect our communities. Unfortunately, the existing PSOB program does not cover the rare instance in which a retired law enforcement officer dies as a result of their service. In 2012, Chief Herbert D. Profit, a retired law enforcement officer in Kentucky, was going about his day. And when he went outside his house to check his mail, he was tragically shot and killed by a man he had arrested a decade earlier. And even though his murder was a direct retaliation for his service in uniform, Chief Profit's family was denied the benefits they deserve simply because he had already retired. To me, that is unacceptable. And I know my colleagues on both sides of the aisle agree. That's why Senator McConnell and I worked together to write the Chief Herbert D. Profit Act to ensure that families of retired law enforcement officers who were killed as a result of their service are not denied benefits. So no more families have to go through what Chief Profit's family has gone through. This is just common sense bipartisan legislation that passed unanimously out of the Judiciary Committee. Unanimously. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill and the rest of the bipartisan bills in this package to protect the men and women who protect us every day and their families. And I would like at this time, Mr. President, to provide an opportunity for my colleague from Iowa, to yield some time to him, the Judiciary Chairman right now, to provide some remarks.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Iowa.
Yeah. First of all, I thank Senator from Nevada for coming to the floor to push for passage of these bipartisan bills that she has mentioned. I also see that Senator Klobuchar's on the floor to seek legislation that she has worked on in a bipartisan way to protect law enforcement and first responders. And I would also support her efforts. Law enforcement across the country put their lives on the line every day. We see examples of the dangers they face on the news in our communities on a daily basis. This month, Immigration and Customs Enforcement reported on a 830% increase in assaults on their officers and agents during the course of their enforcement duties. Agents and officers had rocks and other projectiles thrown at them, causing injury to person and property. These agents and officers have been doxxed and had their home addresses, family members' names, and other personal information posted on social media for anyone to see, which has resulted in an increased number of threats and intimidations to these law enforcement personnel and their families. We had the opportunity to hear firsthand from 3 federal law enforcement officers during Judiciary Committee hearing on cartels last month about the ongoing risk and dangers to law enforcement. We had Special Agent in Charge Matthew Allen of Los Angeles Field Office of the Drug Enforcement Administration testified that his agents are oftentimes surveilled by cartel members and other bad actors. He further testified that he has lost several friends and fellow law enforcement officers as a result of their law enforcement duties. And just recently, we learned that an off-duty Custom and Border Protection officer was shot in the face in New York City during an attempted robbery that by a previously deported illegal alien. Thankfully, the officer is expected to survive. According to the Fraternal Order of Police, as of June 30th this year, 166 officers were shot in the line of duty. 21 of them lost their life. While these numbers are lower than from previous years, the shooting this weekend is yet another example of the threats and dangers of our men and women in blue facing every day, both on and off duty. Earlier this year, Senator Durbin, who is also on the floor with us, and he's the ranking member of the committee I chair, he and I led a resolution honoring 234 officers who made the ultimate sacrifice and are being recognized as line of duty deaths. It passed with over 80 co-sponsors. We worked together across the aisle to report these bills that are being discussed here on the floor of the Senate. Those bills were voted out of committee on what we honor as Police Week in the United States. The 7 bills are part of the largest Police Week packages in over 15 years. The package of 7 bills passed the committee with bipartisan support and also by unanimous vote. They provide a good example of the extensive problems facing our law enforcement community. For example, one bill deals with recruitment and retention issues to ensure our law enforcement is well staffed. Other bills deal with protecting law enforcement from the dangers of fentanyl and providing law enforcement with the equipment that they need to serve our communities. Lastly, the bills provide the protection to families of first responders and provide the much needed resources for mental health of law enforcement. Mr. President, I'd like to yield back to the senator from Nevada.
Thank you. Mr. President?
The senator from Nevada.
Thank you. I so appreciate a colleague from Iowa and the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and all the good work he has done on these important pieces of legislation as they really work toward ensuring that all of our communities across the country stay safe, and we are supporting our law enforcement. So, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the following bills in block: Cal number 77, S-180, Cal number 79, S-419, Cal number 80, S-539, Cal number 81, S-911, Cal number 82, S-1316, Cal number 83, S-1563, Cal number 84, S-1595. Further, that the committee reported substitute amendment to S-1563 be agreed to, and the committee reported amendment to S-1316 be agreed to, that the committee reported substitute amendment to S-539 be withdrawn, and the Cornyn substitute amendment at the desk be agreed to. Finally, that the bills as amended, if amended, be considered read a third time and passed in block, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, all in block.
Is there an objection?
Reserving the right to object.
Senator from New Jersey.
Thank you very much. I'm reserving the right to object. I want to begin by acknowledging the tragic loss of a New York City police officer, Dar al-Islam, last night, just about 15 miles from where I live. He made the ultimate sacrifice, bravely placing himself in harm's way to protect strangers people he didn't know, because that's what American police officers do. This selfless commitment is a daily reminder. It's a reminder of the reality for police officers in America who risk their lives to safeguard communities. My deepest condolences go out to his family and his young children during this time of unimaginable grief. I rise today to propose an amendment to the bills before us, one that guarantees every officer in every state, like Officer Islam, has the full support they deserve in their service to our communities from this body. Sadly, this is not what the Justice Department is doing. Rather than supporting law enforcement agencies and officers equally across the nation, they are weaponizing public safety grants to punish state and local jurisdictions that resist the Trump policy agenda, including my home state of New Jersey. The Department of Justice is right now withholding funds from law enforcement agencies across the country, including New Jersey, that we have passed through this body in a bipartisan way unless they enforce the administration's unjust immigration agenda and comply with the president's unjust and unlawful executive orders and memoranda. It is disgraceful. It is unfair. It is unjust. And it is dangerously reckless towards the officers whose well-being they are jeopardizing. Officers like the ones I know personally who serve and protect New Jersey. Come on now. Federal funds should not be used for partisan political games. They shouldn't be weaponized to benefit this state that supported the president and this state that didn't support the president. This is the shift towards authoritarianism. It is undermining the separation of powers we have here in America. This body has duly approved grants. It is our job, it is spelled out in the Constitution, that each of us has sworn an oath to protect. And this president is upending that process, violating the will of this body, Democrats and Republicans alike, in pursuit of his petty political agenda. And who is getting hurt? Well, in this case, New Jersey police officers are being hurt. New York police officers are getting hurt in the wake of a murder of a police officer in New York yesterday. This is outrageous. Public safety grants like these that I am a co-sponsor of are not meant to reward law enforcement in favored jurisdictions or state while punishing others. It shouldn't matter whether a person puts on his uniform in Texas or New Jersey. Does it matter that Officer Islam, who was killed last night in New York City, does it matter that he's a New York cop and not a North Dakota cop? Sadly, it appears that Donald Trump thinks so. And for us as a body to move forward right now is being complicit in what Donald Trump is doing. I say no. I say we stand. I say we fight. I say we reject this, and in a bipartisan way that we demand an end to this kind of constitutionally unjust carving up of the resources we approve. Think about this. In April, Donald Trump's administration cut nearly 400 public safety grants administered by its Office of Justice programs without any notice or explanation. Think about that for a second. Programs that I supported, programs that I co-sponsored, programs that protect police officers and communities, he canceled without a justification. I have written letters to the Justice Department. They have not given a justification. I've asked in open hearings, why did you cut this funding for approved grants to states like New Jersey? No justification. I sent a letter to the DOJ signed by 30 of my colleagues demanding information about what happened and that they reinstate all grants that had been rescinded, and no action and no response. And yet today we want to move forward with needed grant programs to protect police officers, but that money won't go to New York. That money won't go to New Jersey. You gotta be kidding me. When will we stand and fight this president? This offers little consolation. Today, nobody is speaking to the organizations in New Jersey, to the police officers in New Jersey that partner with law enforcement but now lack the resources to endure a burdensome appeal to operate without critical grants or fundings now for months. When are we going to stand up as a body and defend our work, defend our jurisdiction, defend this co-equal branch of government? I ask my colleagues to pass these bills with my amendment, to provide resources to law enforcement agencies with this important provision that safeguards these grants from politicization and ensures that all law enforcement agencies have their fair chance to secure these important grants. Our officers have the hardest job in America. Every day they put their lives on the line. Why would we do something today that's playing into the president's politics and is going to hurt the officers in states like mine? I believe in these bills. I'm a co-sponsor on some. And that's why I'm standing here to fight to ensure police departments in New Jersey aren't excluded from accessing these vital funds. Our officers have just as much of a right as officers in other states. So do officers in California, in New York, in Illinois, in Washington, and other states that have been the target of this Department of Justice. I am an American. I pledge allegiance to that flag, liberty and justice for all. Pass my amendment and make sure that all officers in America who put their lives on the line have access to these grants. I ask the consent be modified, the bill be modified, that my amendments to S-180, S-419, S-539, S-1316, and S-1563, which are at the desk, also be agreed to. And the bills as amended, if amended, be considered read a third time and passed in block so that all police officers in America can get the intended resources that the Judiciary Committee passed unanimously for American police.
Is there an objection to the modification?
Mr. President.
The senator from Nevada.
Reserving the right to object. I agree. Withholding funding for law enforcement anywhere in the country, across the country, is just not acceptable, and it should not be done. And it should not be based on party, affiliation, playing favoritism. I absolutely agree. But I also agree that two wrongs don't make a right. And where we are today, these bills passed unanimously out of the Judiciary Committee weeks ago. And my colleague from New Jersey, I have respect for him. He's on the committee. He voted to pass these bills. He had an opportunity at that time to present this amendment. This is the first time we're ever hearing about it. We've been trying to pass these package of bills that passed out of committee unanimously for the last 8 weeks. And now that we came to the floor to try to push and get this done, we are hearing for the first time about this amendment. Now, let me just say, this amendment really is not even applicable to the bill that, the profit bill that is part of this. This not even has nothing to do with grant funding. His bill has everything to do with trying to make sure that grant funding goes to all the states. My bill doesn't even talk about grant funding. There's no funding associated with it. But yet he wants to put it on my piece of legislation. This is why this is ridiculous. This is an attempt to kill all of these bills. I don't know why. I don't know why. Because at the end of the day, all of these bills are about bipartisan support. And if my colleague absolutely has concerns about getting funding to his law enforcement, I'd be willing to work with him. I would be willing to work, and I know my colleagues would, to figure out how we ensure that this administration doesn't play favorites and is fighting for that funding and holding them accountable to get that funding to all of our law enforcement communities across this country. I agree, President Trump's impoundment of funding, it is a serious concern. But tacking on a poison pill language to these bills won't guarantee any additional funding makes it to New Jersey, Nevada, or any other state. Instead, what it will do, it will keep critical bills from passing in the first place. Now, let me just say that again. These are critical bills. One bill, the Protecting First Responders for Secondary Exposure Act, it requires purchasing devices that prevent secondary exposure to fentanyl and other lethal substances. Reauthorizing Support and Treatment for Officers in Crisis Act of 2025. It provides family support and mental health services to law enforcement personnel. Protect Our Children Reauthorization Act of 2025. It assists federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies in investigating and prosecuting child exploitation. And we are sitting here today saying that is not going to pass, even though it came out of committee unanimously. Even though there was a time to address the concerns that my colleague has, and now he wants to kill all of these bills. Some of them that his amendment is not even applicable to. So you've got to question what is going on here. Is this the right venue to fight for what he is seeking? And I absolutely respect him and understand his concern, and be willing to fight with him to get that funding, essential funding, into a state that this administration apparently is blocking. But this is not the way to go about it, to kill all of these bills with this poison pill amendment. And for that reason, Mr. President, I object.
Reserving the right to object.
Is there an objection to the original request?
Reserving the right to
The
object.
senator from New Jersey.
I'm confused by my colleague because she knows I don't object to her two bills. She's going to be coming here to offer her two bills in a second, so I don't know what the confusion is there. I object to the bills that are putting resources out that states from California to New York are not eligible for because of the actions of this president. The second thing my colleague confuses me is saying I had my chance. Well, actually, I didn't. The regularly scheduled Judiciary Committee hearing wrapped up, and then a hastily one was put back together. I had no notice of that, no ability to plan for it, and had a conflict. This, to me, is the problem with Democrats in America right now, is we're willing to be complicit to Donald Trump to let this pass through when we have all the leverage right now there is to say, if you're as passionate about police as we are, then pass bills out of this body that will help the police officers in Washington, that will help the police officers in Illinois, that will help the police officers in New Jersey, that will help the police officers in New York. Don't be complicit to the President of the United States, who we both know doesn't understand that language. Oh, please, don't hurt blue states. We are standing at a moment where our president is eviscerating the Constitution of the United States of America, and we're willing to go along with that today. No, not on my watch. I stand against this. It is a violation of our Constitution for the President of the United States to ignore the will of Congress and decide which states are eligible to grants and which are not. Well, we know something in New York and New Jersey. I was a Newark elected official when 9/11 happened. I saw my first responders charging into those buildings. I know what police officers do every day. My amendment was just called the poison pill. That's ridiculous. What my amendment does, it says the police officers in New Jersey are just as important as the police officers in North or South Dakota. It says the police officers in New York are just as important as the police officers in Texas. It says the police officers in California are just as important as the police officers in Alabama. Why would we go along with a president who is violating our Constitution time and time again? When in the history of this body, Democrats and Republicans used to stand up for their turf? These could easily pass. Put a simple amendment that says, you know what, you can play games however you want, President Trump, but when it comes to resources for police officers, no games. Today, I stand and fight for the Constitution. I stand and fight against this president, and heck yeah, I'm going to stand and fight for the police officers from the great state of New Jersey. I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I want to thank the senator from Nevada for her work in trying to bring these bills to a vote on the floor. I want to thank Senator Grassley, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I want to thank Senator Durbin, who is there, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, someone who has, by the way, been a leading voice on immigration for years in this chamber. And one of the things I don't understand here is that we have committees for a reason, and we have hearings for a reason. And you can't do one thing on Police Week and not show up and not object and let these bills go through and then say another a few weeks later in a big speech on the floor. So I like to show up at the markups, and I like to make my case. And I will note that Senator Booker objected to my police reauthorization bill, the COPS funding, the Clinton COPS funding, long before Donald Trump came into office. So this is not just about this. This is a long dispute over this type of funding. Funding that I think is really important right now. Our country's law enforcement professionals do some of the hardest and most important work out there. Every day across America, we ask them to put everything on the line to keep us safe. We ask them to run towards danger and to guide others to safety. And every day across America, they put on their uniforms, their bulletproof vests, their badges, and they get to work. We need to have their backs, and that's what this package of bills does. By the way, bills supported out of the committee from some of the most liberal senators and some of the most conservative senators in this body. We came together. There were bills we would have liked to include that we did not. And if the objection is based on some of this horror show that's going on out of the White House, I agree with that piece of Senator Booker's points. And I have been equally vociferous in taking on this administration. But all of these bills came out of the committee unanimously, and I think they deserve that support on the floor. These bills help fund grants for mental health services for law enforcement. And by the way, if this issue, which I agree with Senator Booker on, about that all these states should be treated the same, well, then I suppose then he will be voting against all of this funding for New Jersey unless this is changed. So we should be watching for that for every single vote instead of just these bills that are in front of us that were supported unanimously out of committee. Grants that help law enforcement combat child sexual exploitation. Grants to help address the recruitment and retention crisis that is plaguing local law enforcement. Senator Cortez Masto's bill, as she explained, would help support the families of fallen law enforcement officers who were targeted and attacked because of their service as law enforcement. My bill, which has been now objected to, so I'm not going to mention it separately or ask for it to be called up separately. My bill, the Retired Law Enforcement Officers Continuing Service Act, done with Senator Grassley, would make sure that law enforcement agencies can continue to utilize the skills that talented law enforcement retirees have built up over their career of public service. There are many retired law enforcement officers who want an active retirement and are eager and ready to serve their community. This might sound like small ball, but when we are looking at how we're going to build up these police agencies, when we don't have enough police, when they're out there at these scenes getting shot at, we've got to be creative in terms of the ideas. And I believe strongly we're going to see another president in the future. We're going to see out of these next elections a check on some of this. But for now, I want to get these programs started. This bill would allow law enforcement agencies across the country to keep using their expertise to review video footage, to solve carjacking cases, or help cyber and financial crime investigations. This bill will also help train the next generation of law enforcement officers. These and the other police bills passed during Police Week, while those police officers are sitting there in the hearing room, when no one objected, they are bipartisan, common sense legislation. They passed the Judiciary Committee unanimously. And I can't help it if someone couldn't change their schedule to be there. I think that these hearings should mean something, and that people should be saying the same thing they say on Police Week when those people are sitting out there in the uniforms who have lost loved ones, as they say on this Senate floor. If we expect law enforcement to respond to some of the most difficult crises at a moment's notice, it's on us to set them up for success. I was there at the National Mall where it rained the entire night, and not a family wasn't there when they thought it was going to be a nicer day. And that was this year on the National Mall to honor those fallen heroes, the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Candlelight Vigil. Every single officer whose name was read that night was a beloved family member and a friend to so many, including 3 from my state. There was Officer Jamal Mitchell, who was shot and killed in the line of duty just last June, and Officers Paul Elmstead and Matthew Ruge, who along with firefighter-paramedic Adam Finseth were killed responding to a domestic violence call in Burnsville, Minnesota. They were called to duty, they answered the call. They actually got 7 kids out of this house and saved their lives. And then one was gunned down. The paramedic came in to try to save him. He was gunned down. And I will never forget hearing from Burnsville Police Sergeant Adam Medlicott, who was there with the 3 fallen first responders when they answered the call. He said of his fallen comrades, "We were there for 7 children. Nothing could be more honorable." He is absolutely right. You can't teach that kind of heroism. Our brave law enforcement professionals deserve to know that the resources they rely on will be there when they need them. And I hope we can work some of this out. I completely agree with Senator Booker about what this administration is doing. But you can't just pick out a few bills that came out of a committee and say, I'm going to stop those, and then allow for other bills that fund other parts of your budget in your state. Thank you.
Senator from New Jersey.
I was just called out by name, and I want to respond. This is what frustrates me. I've passed numerous pieces of legislation for our police officers. I partnered with Chuck Grassley, the incredible senator from Iowa, on a bill very similar to the one I support about police officers who fall in the line of duty. In this case, it was COVID. Police officers who got COVID and died had difficulty proving it was a line of duty death. We passed legislation to make sure those families get the benefits. I've worked in bipartisan ways and within my own party to make sure we get resources to our police officers. I don't need lectures about the urgency of this. One of my childhood best friends, a police officer in a small town in New Jersey, after a hard day's work, before he even went home to see his family, died by suicide. I don't need somebody implying in any way that this is not vital to me and my state, that we have resources for our police officers. That's why I support this package. That's why I'm a co-sponsor of some of the bills in this package. But what I am tired of is when the President of the United States of America violates the Constitution, trashes our norms and traditions. And what does the Democratic Party do? Comply? Allow him? Beg for scraps? No, I demand justice. Somebody's implying that this to me is not about resources for my state. I will fight for Jersey every day, every night. And when it comes to the police officers of my state, anybody who implies that something is going on other than my allegiance and fealty to the safety, strength, and protection of my police officers because they protect me and everybody in this body. This is a call, folks. The Democratic Party needs a wake-up call. I see law firms bending a knee to this president, not caring about the larger principles, that those free speech rights, that you could take on any client, why are you bending the knee? I see universities that should be bastions of free speech bending at the knee to this president. I see businesses taking late-night talk show hosts off the air because they dare to insult a president. I see people who want mergers suddenly think that they have to pay tribute to this president. And what are the very people here elected to defend the Constitution of the United States saying, oh, well, today, let's look the other way and pass some resources that won't go to Connecticut, that won't go to Illinois, that won't go to New York, that will go to the states he likes. That is complicity with an authoritarian leader who is trashing our Constitution. It's time for Democrats to have a backbone. It's time for us to fight. It's time for us to draw lines. And when it comes to the safety of my state being denied these grants, that's why I'm standing here. Don't question my integrity. Don't question my motives. I'm standing for Jersey. I am standing for my police officers. I'm standing for the Constitution, and I'm standing for what's right. And dear God, if you want to come at me that way, you're going to have to take it up with me, because there's too much on the line right now in America. As people's due process rights and freedom of the speech rights and secret police are running around this country, picking people up off the streets who have a legal right to be here. There's too much going on in this country. When are we going to stand together for principles that I just heard that we're agreed with? When are we going to stand together? If we don't stand as Democrats, we deserve to lose. But if we stand united, if we stand strong, if we stand with other people, if we tell with a chorus of conviction in America what this president is doing is wrong, if we stand up and speak that way, dear God, we will win. Like all of those people that are ancestors who joined hands together and said, we shall overcome. No, not on my watch. I'm protecting Jersey today. I'm protecting our Constitution today. I'm standing today.
Mr. President.
The senator from Nevada.
Mr. President, let me try to refocus this on the bills that are for us today. I'm not sure the answer here is to stop bipartisan legislation that gives tools to law enforcement across the community to keep our community safe. That stopping those is the answer moving forward here. I don't know of anyone across this community that when they have a concern, that when they make that 911 call, they want law enforcement to respond. I don't care whether you're Republican, Democrat, I don't care if you're nonpartisan, I don't care where you live. You want law enforcement to respond if there's something happening in your community. And that's what these bills are focused on, is how do we ensure that our law enforcement have the tools that they need to ensure that they can keep our communities safe. That's all it is. And there's several of them. They're bipartisan. And passed in a unanimous way for that very reason, to keep our communities safe. Now, we can talk about funding for those and appropriations, and that's a separate subject. I'm willing to work with my colleague and fight the administration from stopping that funding. But if we don't pass these pieces of legislation, we're not even giving the tools to law enforcement to keep our communities safe. That's what this is about, and that's why there was unanimous consent for it. I do want to also thank one other person that I didn't get a chance to, which is Senator Durbin. He has worked tirelessly on the Judiciary Committee on these pieces of legislation, working with law enforcement, working with all of us, understanding that it is about safe communities at the end of the day and ensuring we keep and give law enforcement the tools they need to keep our communities safe. I also appreciate my colleague who's willing to work with me on two pieces of the bills that are before us, albeit we worked this out just before we walked on the floor today. But I appreciate his willingness to allow me to really kind of pull out two pieces of legislation and talk to him about it. and then his willingness to, of what I'm hearing, is support it. So, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the following bills in block: Cal number 81, S911, and Cal number 84, S1595.
Is there an objection to proceeding to the measures on block?
Reserving the right to object.
The senator from New Jersey.
So this casts a shadow over everything that was just said because I support these bills. Why do I support these bills? Because the officers of the state of New Jersey are going to benefit from them. Because Donald Trump hasn't targeted these and cut these. And these are things going to help all officers. That's what this body should do, not pick and choose one state over another, not pit one state against another, not pit blue states, so-called blue states over so-called red states. It's the United States of America. God bless my colleague for bringing these bills forward. They should have been passed a long time ago. I support them fully because they will apply to every officer in the United States of America. That's the way this body should work, and I have no objection whatsoever.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed on block.
Unanimous consent that the bills be considered read a third time and passed in block, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table in block.
Is there an objection?
I just would like the clerk to read
Senator
the
from
titles
New
of the two
Jersey.
bills.
The clerk will report.
Counter number 81, S911, a bill to amend the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968 to include certain retired law enforcement officers in the Public Safety Officers Death Benefits Program. Counter number 84, S1595, a bill to establish standards for trauma kits purchased using funds provided under the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program.
Is there an objection to the request? Without objection.
Mr. President,
The senator from Montana.
Mr. President, hydropower. It produces affordable, reliable, clean baseload power in Montana and across the United States. For years, I've worked with my colleagues to grow our hydropower portfolio, creating new jobs, lowering prices,